In a time when there's separation, in a time when there's isolation, when there's a time when there's some quarantine, I said to my community, oh, no, this is a time for us to unify. We have to unify as a community, and we have to then, in a new consciousness, in a non-local way, create a greater understanding and unify in this time. And it's love that bonds us. The frequency, the energy of love is what creates connection. And we have to just get here. And so this is the time in history now where a new consciousness has to be born, and it's not one individual. We don't need to see one another to connect. We could connect when we open our hearts and we know how to apply brain and heart coherence, and wow, now you're empowered. And the practice of doing this is no different than anything you practice. You keep doing it, you're just going to get better at it. And that's what I want people to do, is step out in their life in a greater level of consciousness and stop believing that they're limited. Stop unconsciously thinking something out there is going to get them. That's a lot of limitation, and it doesn't say to not be careful. I'm just saying that I wouldn't give my power away to that. I wouldn't give it away. And if I'm eternal, well, this is a time to actually try it out, to demonstrate it, to see if it's true.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs, sharing our vulnerability, overcoming our fears, transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Dr. Joe Dispenza, the New York Times bestselling author, international lecturer, researcher, and educator. Your work on neuroscience, epigenetics, and quantum physics explores the science behind spontaneous remissions and is driven by the conviction that everyone has the potential for greatness. The world is now gripped by the coronavirus pandemic and global lockdown, and we are here to discuss how your teachings can boost the immune system and reframe our consciousness. Your work helping me process my own trauma is featured in our 5th documentary feature film, RECONNECT, which of course is free to watch on reconnectmovie.com. Dr. Joe, welcome back to London Real. It's great to have you here.
I'm always happy to be with you, Brian.
And again, Joe, thank you so much for being a part of that movie. I know we kind of roped you into that as I was dealing with my personal traumas and things going on in my life, but it was so epic having you there reframing that stuff. So thank you for that. And if anybody wants to watch that, I can go to our website. Joe, this is interesting times we're living in now, and you were one of the first guys I thought of when it comes to try to, I don't know, reframe what's going on and try to put this in perspective. There's a lot of people out there that are finding this challenging and difficult. There's a lot of fear, and I'm just so glad you're here. And I wanted to know, what do you think is most important for us to think about or concentrate on in these challenging times?
Well, I mean, these are amazing times, and in order for us to wake up, we need a wake-up call. And if you can frame the circumstances to see that's an opportunity for everybody to pause and retreat from their lives, and by removing the constant stimulation in their external environment that reminds them of who they think they are as a personality. They're not going to the same places, they're not seeing the same people, they're not doing the same things, and they're actually confined to kind of a personalized retreat in the comfort of their own home. Now, the beauty behind this is who you're going to emerge as. And sure, the conditions in our environment are causing us to be uncertain. And in uncertainty, when things, we can't predict certain things, we move from everything that's predictable and known to this realm called the unknown. And if we're truly going to make a difference in the world, we have to be creative. The problem is that when we're threatened by circumstances in our external environment, our response to those circumstances causes us to move into a very primitive state, a response from the autonomic nervous system that drives the body into what's called the sympathetic response, a fight or flight response. So in that emergency mode, the brain and the body go into an alarm state because there's a threat or a danger that we're perceiving in our outer environment. Now, for the short term, that's okay because all organisms can cope with short-term stress. But if our response to the environment is keeping that stress response going on for an extended period of time, stress is when the brain and body are knocked out of homeostasis. Stress is when the brain and body are knocked out of balance. So people, when they react to circumstances that are unpredictable, that are uncertain, that they can't control an outcome, or they have the perception that things are going to get worse, it's the exact motive that turns on that fight or flight response. So now when the person's living in fear, they're mobilizing enormous amounts of energy for some danger in their outer world. Now, there's only a certain amount of energy in the body, and if there's no energy in the inner environment for growth and repair, we become more susceptible to the conditions in our outer environment. In other words, our response in fear, in aggression, in frustration, in pain, in suffering actually weakens the organism. So now, in these times, we have to become conscious about our relationship with our body. We have to become aware that we are amazing human beings that come fully loaded with an immune system that combats bacteria and viruses, cancer cells, funguses, and molds that happen on a moment-to-moment basis. And so let's just say that in your normal life, you're reacting to the traffic, you're reacting to your coworkers, you're reacting to the news, and your response to any one of those circumstances in your outer environment causes you to feel some of those limited emotions. So I say to you, Brian, why are you angry? Why are you upset? Why are you frustrated? Why are you in pain? So if you say unconsciously or even consciously, it's the traffic, it's the news, it's my coworker that's making me feel and think this way, what you're really saying is you're vulnerable to your environment because something in your outer world is actually controlling and influencing how you think and feel. So anything that's controlling you or you have no control over, you are, or think you have no control over, you are a victim to your environment. And it is that consciousness that causes us to become more susceptible to anything in our outer environment. And so the immune system becomes compromised. The internal system of our internal environment that's responsible for metabolism, assimilation, growth, and repair. So our research shows that, well, first of all of our training, all of our work that we've done, everybody that's listening to this show is looking for answers because they believe that there is more to reality than this dream. And it's an instinct that we have that never seems to go away. And that feeling that sometimes is difficult to describe has brought people to search for greater information, for greater truth. And so the relationship that we have with our body tells us that when people understand that change is to be greater than their body, to be greater than the conditions in their environment, and to be able to sustain that type of change for an extended period of time, then all of the training, all of our practice, all of our meditations, all of our transformation, all of our awareness is for times like these. This is where now we have to apply everything we've learned. We're out of the bleachers now and we're on the playing field. So our research shows that, fear and those stress hormones actually suppress the immune response. But if people understood how powerful their immune system really is, that if they traded that fear for gratitude, and I know that there's may not be a whole lot of things to be grateful for, but if you live in survival, you see limited possibilities because in stress and in survival, you will begin to select scenarios in your mind to prepare for the worst thing that could happen. Now, That's a kind of a limited imagination, but if you trade that emotional state for an elevated emotion like love or wholeness or inspiration or gratitude or thankfulness, our research shows that by converting from that sympathetic nervous system and teaching the body that it's safe in the present moment and beginning to activate elevated emotions, if you just practice that for 10 minutes a day for 2 or 3 times a day, that your immune system will strengthen by 50%. That's a significant amount of change. Now, that's saying that once you activate this center called your heart center, your center of oneness, your center of wholeness, the union of opposites, this is where we begin to create from. This is when we're in a state of creation. We're seeing possibilities that we've never seen before. Now we're no longer victims to our environment. We're now coming up with solutions that cause us to respond in greater ways to our environment. That once energy makes it to this center, that little gland that sits right next to your heart, called the thymus gland, thymus mean time, like a time leaf, has 2 functions. It has a endocrinological function, which makes growth hormone, which is the fountain of youth. That's what causes a response and repair quickly in the body and regeneration. And then it has an immunological function, and it releases a chemical called thymosin. And when activated, thymosin signals T cells, your elite force in your body. And T cells have receptors on the outside of their cells that have to be activated. And when you're feeling gratitude or love, it's a time for growth and repair. And the emotion then is what begins to select and instruct different genes and activate these T cell receptors that cause the T cell to actually be able to become powerful or empowered against foreign agents, viruses, bacteria, molds, even cancer cells. So by moving into a state of balance, you're strengthening your inner environment. These T cells can actually combat the very foreign agents from our environment. And it's happening right now. It's happening for us right now. Our immune system is memorizing foreign agents on a moment-to-moment basis. But if you're living in fear and the chemical response to your environment is saying it's dangerous or threatening out there, then those chemicals actually shut down the T receptor sites because it needs energy for the emergency in the outer environment. So we become more susceptible to foreign agents in our inner environment. So when the receptors are stimulated, in order for the body to produce antibodies or immunoglobulins, proteins, a gene has to be signaled. So it's the chemical state of wholeness and gratitude that's saying that it's safe enough to relax into the present moment, and now there's growth and repair going on. The chemical signal then activates the receptors activate the gene makes a protein called an immunoglobulin, and immunoglobulin A is your primary defense against bacteria and viruses. And our research shows 4 days is going to increase that chemical by 50%. And those antibodies are Y-shaped proteins that actually stop the receptors from a virus or a bacteria from attacking it. So now there's an elite force of T cells that's made right from your thymus gland. When energy and blood flow makes it in there, there's a host of physiological changes that begin to take place that causes you to become more immune to the conditions in your environment. So I think it's important for people to understand that they're not limited, that only if they believe that something out there is going to get them, the stronger the fear that we have, the more we put our attention on the cause. And where we place our attention is where we place our energy. So in a sense, we're giving our vitality, our very energy to change and heal to that circumstance. It has power over us. So teaching people how to self-regulate and teaching people how to retreat from their lives and see this as a great opportunity to emerge as somebody else, all of a sudden it becomes a different circumstance.
You know, Joe, we never hear the medical community talk about this stuff. We see I watch the daily conferences with Trump and Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, and, they talk about washing your hands and social distancing. And here, the NHS in London is saying the same thing. They never say, that I should have a meditation, that I should calm myself, that I should be in gratitude. And yet I know, because I do London Real and I spent so much time with you and other great thinkers, that this stuff is really powerful. Like, is it ever strange to you that the medical community hasn't embraced some of this stuff?
Well, listen, I'm not opposed to limiting the infectious circumstances by social distancing or physical distancing. I'm not opposed to washing your hands to maintain a certain amount of a sanitary state. But the real question is, why do some people get it and other people don't? That's really a more important question. So if there's 3 types of stress, Brian: physical stress, trauma, accidents, injuries. You have chemical stress, pesticides, pollutants, toxins, blood sugar levels, and you have emotional stress, family tragedies, second mortgages, single parenting, loss of a job, and all of these things knock the brain and body out of balance. Well, let's just say if you have 3 types of stresses that create imbalance, then there's 3 types of things that do create balance. So the person who is physically out of balance because they broke a hip or they had an injury and they're not sleeping through the night and their body's out of chemical balance, it's in a weakened state. They're taking certain medications that have effects on their body that causes them to be chemically out of balance. They have diabetes. They're working in an environment where there's some type of vapor that weakens their immune system. They just lost their job. Their family members in the hospital. And so now they're out of balance and they are more susceptible to those conditions. And so I don't think that the medical community intentionally does not want to inform people, but everybody's in emergency mode. And when you're in emergency mode and you're feeling those emotions, no new information really enters the nervous system that isn't equivalent with the emotion that we're experiencing. So we accept information more readily when we feel fear that is equal to that fear. And so helping people to understand that they're not as limited as they once believed, that there is an innate intelligence in the body that has memorized viruses and bacteria for thousands of years. And we just have to understand that it's not that we react. The question is how long we react. In teaching people that they have some control over their emotional state begins to teach them that they can actually change the physiology, the chemistry, and even the gene expression of their body. And we have research to show in 4 days of doing the proper things, you can begin to change your gene expression. I mean, that gives you more power. So this isn't natural. This isn't normal. You don't see this. But when you start engaging information that says what's possible, I think all of a sudden now people start looking at possibilities they never looked before. And by the way, this is the time where we have to actually apply this information and personalize it. And so I'm interested in empowering people, not to say go out and start living your normal life. I'm saying, look, let's just practice during this time on how to become conscious of our thoughts, what thoughts we do want to pay attention to. Let's become aware of how we speak, how we act. Let's think about how we're feeling and decide if I want to continue to feel that way. Now, if you're not going anywhere and you're not seeing anybody and you're learning information and you got time, you're not traveling, you're not commuting, you're not going to work, you got a little extra time on your hands. If you choose to binge watch a series of TV shows, and don't expect your life to change much. But if you said, hey, I'm going to practice some inner work here, I'm going to fill my brain with knowledge, I'm going to practice my own personal change and transformation, what a great opportunity. Then all of a sudden, and I said this to my staff, I refuse to be a victim or be victimized by this circumstance. I will adapt, I will create, I will change, I will figure out ways from a greater level of consciousness to respond to those conditions. And that's what I'm after. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in in coming up with greater solutions. And people who are in survival, you can't do that because it's not a time to create. It's a time to respond and react. But we have to begin to lay down what we've done our whole life to get what we want for something greater to occur. And now when people start opening their hearts and when they start creating heart coherence, and we have research to show that you can do that and learn the skill. And when your brain is in an emergency state and you're in high beta brainwave patterns, the alarm system is switched on, and you're narrowing your focus on your outer world because that's where the danger is. And the brain gets very, very disorderly. It's very incoherent, but we have a formula to teach people how to create more brain coherence. And when they go against those chemicals and they begin to broaden their focus and open their focus and put their attention on space, on information, on energy, it begins to entrain the nervous system into more order. And now they're more coherent. They're clear. They can see possibilities. They're in a creative state. And how we begin to use our heart and our brain to start to produce effects in our outer world is my interest. Now, all of a sudden, when you start seeing those changes appear in your life as a result of your internal changes, you're going to believe less that you're the victim of your life and a little bit more that you're the creator of your life. And that all of a sudden empowers people because they would say, I would never create that disease for myself. I would never create getting that condition. Now, I'm not saying that the people who got the condition weren't created that. I'm saying just maybe we create by default, by not creating, and giving people the understanding that they're not limited, that they are powerful, that their relationship with their immune system is something that they're interacting with on a daily basis. And being able to self-regulate, I think, starts opening doors that we never saw before.
Yeah, you mentioned that this might be a difficult time to be grateful. I think it's easier for me right now to be grateful because I'm thinking about all the things that I used to take for granted, whether that means meeting someone for a coffee or, working, or I look at my kids now and they're completely oblivious about what's going on, and they bring me this fresh energy to the room because they're not stressed. And I don't know, I find now a time where it's a great time to practice that gratitude. And correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but I think in your workshops, you actually put people in these fearful situations, sometimes I think 50 feet in the air, to make sure that they can actually practice these. So you're kind of experienced of teaching people to use this practically in kind of fearful situations. Is that right?
Here's my thing. Brian, I'm never going to stop asking greater questions, and I'm never going to stop pushing that envelope. We have mounds of research from our community, thousands and thousands and thousands of brain scans. We have thousands of heart rate monitor and heart rate variability measurements to show that our community, in fact, Bond University just released our research, and we're writing a paper on it, that our student body could actually self-regulate and change their brain waves in a very, very quick amount of time. We understand how to do that, and we understand how to create that kind of coherence. And if you're doing it in a room where there's soft music playing and there's 1,500 people around you, and it's safe, and you're not distracted by your environment, and the music's filling the space, and your eyes are closed, and you're not going anywhere, you're not eating anything, you're not smelling anything, you're not tasting anything, you're not experiencing and feeling anything. And you have the ability to pay attention and change your brain waves and get beyond your analytical mind and enter your autonomic nervous system. You can begin to produce physiological changes that you thought were only once left to yogis and mystics and masters. And turns out that we can teach people how to do that. So if you do that in the environment where you've practiced it, and then you return back to your life after a week-long retreat, and you start reacting to the same circumstances in your outer environment, every person, every object, everything, every place has a neurological network in your brain because you've experienced it. That means it's known. And because you've experienced that boss or that coworker or your drive to work or your ex or your cell phone or whatever it is, or where you sleep, where you work, you have an emotion, a feeling associated with it because you've experienced it. So then if you've experienced it, then it's known as well. So if you return back to your life and you start responding and reacting to the circumstances in your life, you just went unconscious to the program, or you are back in the subconscious program that you're victimized by your environment. Your environment is controlling the way you feel and think. In other words, you're thinking and feeling equal to your environment. That means how you think and how you feel is your state of being. You just return back to your old self. Don't expect your life to change, because if your personality creates your personal reality, and your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel, and you start thinking the same way, acting the same way, and feeling the same way, then you just return back to the same personality and your life will stay the same. So I thought, okay, these people obviously can do it. We have the data to prove it. So now let's take it to the next level. Let's put people in circumstances where that would normally elicit a survival emotion like fear, that would drive a subconscious or automatic program for them to go unconscious and do exactly what they've always done when they feel these emotions, and throw in a program that would be natural and normal. Or you put them in a circumstance that elicits that same response, and in that moment, that is the moment now where they have to self-regulate, and they have to go against thousands of years of programming and fear. They have to realize that their legs are shaking, their heart is racing, that now the game is on. And they have to, in that moment, practice the very formula that we've taught them in a circumstance that is challenging them to be greater than their environment, to be greater than their body and the response of the body, and not rush through it, but to master the moment in time. And when people start to do this and they settle their brain and body down, something amazing happens. All of a sudden now, they go further than they normally thought they could go. And when they return back to their lives, they will be less prone to react to the same circumstances. They'll be more conscious because they were conscious in that process. And if they've just done that at 45 feet in the air and they return back to their life and they see a circumstance relative to what they just did, they're going to see this as a much less of a challenge in their environment, and they're going to catch themselves and not go unconscious. And in that moment, self-regulate. And I said to my community, when all this happened, hey, all of this training is for now. This is game time. This is where it matters the most. You have to be able to be greater than your emotions, greater than your habits, greater than trying to predict the familiar future, remembering the past, and to be greater than the conditions in your environment. And that means then that we have to step out of the philosophical role into the practical role. And what a great opportunity to move to a greater level of consciousness, a greater level of awareness. And that means that you can't see yourself as victimized or limited.
And so this is kind of a great example of what, you know, kind of that moment where you're 50 feet up, where people can look about this as something that's, you know, a lot of people are potentially going to die and it's dangerous and all that. And this is where they could practice focusing and going against all their normal reactions from thousands of years of programming, which is to retreat and contract and be in fear, and to try to practice being, I think as you call it in the past, the generous present moment, and trying to focus on the gratitude and the love. And this is some of the things you've been teaching people lately, some of these meditations that allow them to do that. Is that right?
Sure. I mean, in my response to creating a greater level of awareness for people, I ran right down to the studio and said, okay, let's cut 2 meditations. Let's create a meditation for people before they go to sleep at night. The last thing they do is to get in touch with elevated emotions and allow the understanding that if the environment signals the gene, and it does, and the end product of an experience in your environment is an emotion, that when you start embracing elevated emotions, your body is so objective. It's the unconscious mind. It does not know the difference between the actual event that's creating that emotion and the emotion that you're fabricating by thought alone. So the body is believing it's living in a new environment, and in fact, you are signaling the gene ahead of the environment, and your inner environment of your body is getting that chemical, that's oxytocin and dopamine and vasopressin and all the wonderful chemicals, nitric oxide, are causing energy to move into your heart, and it's time to repair. And your body gets that signal. It's going to make sense that if you practice this, you're strengthening your inner army. By the same means, this center where our adrenals are, people think it's a bad center, and it's not. It's your center where you willfully empower outcomes in your life, and you want to activate this center and create some energy, and then move that energy into your heart, and then understand that you can empower the power within, and practicing that every day and feeling empowered and feeling strength and feeling invincible and feeling an uncompromising will. You don't think that those chemicals have an influence on your body, but if people have been conditioned and hypnotized into believing that something in their outer world has to change their inner world, whether it's a substance, whether it's a product, whether it's something you consume or you buy, or some government or some whatever it is. If you're waiting for something out there to change your inner state, and you've been conditioned and programmed your whole entire life that you need something out there to change how you feel in here, then when situations get a little bit challenging, and there's nothing out there that's going to change that feeling inside of you, this is game time now. This is the moment you realize, I'm going to have to change my inner state independent of the conditions in my outer environment, and understand that there's science to actually show that you can. So some people would say, well, I'm just going to wait for this, or I'm going to wait for that. Well, those are the people that spend their whole life in separation and lack, waiting for their environment to change to feel gratitude. We're saying, once you understand the what and the why, then the next question is, why don't you do it? Why not have the experience and understand the how? So if the research is there, and not only the evidence that we have in all of the scientific tests that we've done with common people, but there's testimony. There are people that have healed themselves of crazy, crazy health conditions that show us that there is a new consciousness emerging. It is that 4-minute mile where you pierce through a layer of consciousness that is human limitation. And now all of a sudden, just like the 4-minute mile being broken, this is a new consciousness. People are healing from stage 4 cancers. They're healing from all different kind of health conditions, because every day they assign meaning to what they're doing. They're in the game, and every moment matters for them. They're overcoming, and every time they overcome, they're starting to become somebody else. And yeah, it's not easy all the time. I can tell you that from experience. But I don't know any other alternative that's going to empower people to realize how powerful they really are. So I want to create meditations that are important for people in this time, whether it's empowering the power within or falling into love with your body. I want people not to just do it mindlessly. I want them to understand when they do that and why they do that is going to help them to understand how to surrender to the process and understand that they become more unlimited as a result of it.
As usual, Joe, you're just blowing me away, and I'm just trying to process this stuff in my mind, because most of us, I was about to say in the Western world, but most of us in this world are constantly thinking, when I get X, then I'll be happy, right? When I get the promotion, when I get the pair of shoes, when I get married, when I make the $1 million, when it's this external things that's gonna make us happy. And yet there's other people that say you can be happy right now, and that's kind of what you're saying. And also the reality in your brain directly affects your physiology. And so it's the opposite of kind of what we're taught. I mean, growing up as well, and I mean, in America, in a consumer society, it's always kind of like you got to get this to get this. And this is looking at this from a completely different angle.
Well, let's talk about that, because this is essential to understanding whether we create our life matter to matter in separation, or we actually create from the field, from a frequency of energy, to begin to produce effects in three-dimensional reality in the material world. So you and I have been trained to pay attention in a certain way. Tie your shoe, watch the stairs, watch the car. You could fall down and break your neck. And the alarm of paying attention as a kid causes us to narrow our focus on the material world. We narrow our focus on physical things. And when the arousal of those emergency chemicals are heightened, it causes our senses to become heightened. And the very fact of becoming materialists causes us to experience three-dimensional reality in separation. In other words, everything physical, whether it's an object, a place, a person, a body, whatever it is, we experience through our senses, and I'm here and you're there, and there's space between us, and if there's space between us, there's time between us. And so if I'm here in three-dimensional reality and I say I want to go to my car, I have to become aware that I'm here. That's one point of awareness. And my car is another point of awareness. So I'm separate from my car. So now I get up and I move my body through space. And when I move through space, I experience time. If I want to shorten the time, I move faster. If I want to lengthen the time, I move slower. So then there's me here, and then people have their dreams, whatever they are, their wealth, their health, their freedom. And in their mind, because they understand the process of getting things, they say, okay, I'm going to get that new house. And they start dreaming about that new house. And then they say, okay, how am I going to get that house? Okay, I'm going to work more hours. I'm going to sacrifice and save these things. I'm going to do more of this. I'm going to work on the weekends. And they're figuring it out as a predictable matter-to-matter outcome. And so they're living in lack and separation because they place their dreams 2 years, 5 years, 10 years in the future based on what they know about themselves and accomplishing it in the past. So then they're living, waiting for the event to occur in lack and separation so they can feel the emotion of the, well, why do people want abundance? They want to be free. So they're waiting for their abundance to occur to feel freedom. And so the whole entire life, they're living in lack and separation for that event to occur. Now, that's okay because that's creating matter to matter. That's creating in separation. But if you are going to begin to create from the field instead of from matter, something amazing happens to us automatically. Like if you see someone in that car, you see someone with that wardrobe, you see someone with that hairstyle, you see someone with those things, and you experience separation or lack, your brain naturally starts seeing that you could have that. And next thing you know, you see the car, and then you pause for a moment, and your brain starts putting you in the scene. You're driving the car, you're wearing the scarf, you're wearing the wardrobe, you're getting those things. Your brain naturally, because we're creators, begins to imagine. The problem is that people are so impatient that when it doesn't happen, they come back to their senses, they're back to three-dimensional reality, and it doesn't occur. Now they experience more separation. So what do? If you're in lack, you're in separation, and you're in survival, you force outcomes, you control outcomes, you try to manipulate outcomes, you fight for those outcomes because you're matter trying to change matter. And so there's only a certain number of things we can do. We can compete, we can do whatever, but for the most part, we're enslaved into three-dimensional reality. And the hormones of stress then give the body a rush of adrenaline, and we feel our body more. And the arousal causes us to put our attention on our environment, on objects and people and places and things, and we are thinking about the predictable future, trying to predict the future based on the past. And where you place your attention is where you place your energy, and all your attention and energy is immersed in this three-dimensional reality. And now you got to play by the rules, and everything takes time for you to get. So we teach people how to take their attention off their body, off the people in their life, off the things they own, the objects they have, the places they need to go, not think about the future and the past. Train them with a formula to get beyond themselves and disconnect from all of their attention and energy out of this three-dimensional reality. Take their attention off of everything that's known. And if you do that properly and you're not aware of your body, if you're not aware of the people in your life that you identify with, you're not thinking about your cell phone or any object, you're not thinking about where you're sitting, where you work, where you need to go, you're not thinking about the future or the past, you're in the present moment, then what are you? Your consciousness. And now that is the eye of the needle that passes you through to the quantum field. You can't enter that place as a somebody. You got to enter as a nobody. And turns out that our research shows that when people do this properly, now there's elegant changes that take place in the brain and in the heart. Now, all of a sudden, instead of in survival, drawing from that invisible field of energy and information surrounding your body and mobilizing it into chemistry, and the field around your body shrinks, you become more matter and less energy. When people dissociate from everything known in their life and they take their attention off of their body, their environment, and time, now all of a sudden, energy moves into the heart. We've measured this 1,000 times. Energy moves right back into the brain. And now all of a sudden, the brain starts getting very synchronized, very organized, and there's a cadence that's created in the brain. By the same means, they're slowing down their brain waves and they're getting beyond their analytical mind, their thinking neocortex. And the brain gets highly organized. The heart begins to become organized. The heart produces a field around the body. It's energy. That energy is a frequency. Frequency carries information. And now they have the energy, once energy makes it here, to lay a thought on that frequency. And now they got a Wi-Fi signal. Now they're connected to something greater. Once energy makes it to their heart, they're not feeling lack and separation. How could you feel lack when you're feeling whole? How could you look for your dream to happen when you feel like it's already happened? And people are changing their energy. They're connecting to information. They're suggestible. They're able to access frequency that's carrying information, not through their senses, but through the field. And when they do this properly, and we could actually predict it, there is a dramatic change that takes place in the person where they have an inner event that seems more real than any external event in their life. And this is the moment where they connect to something greater. And this is the moment where when they finish their experience and their inward process, they feel like it's already happened. Now, if you feel like your future has already happened, you feel the emotion before it's happened, you wouldn't be looking for it when it would happen, because that would mean you're separate from it. If you feel like it's happened, why would you look for it? There's no place to look. You're in the present moment. And it's this kind of energetic shift that begins to cause those synchronicities and those coincidences and all those wonderful events that start showing people, wow, I'm actually creating my life. Now, they're less responsive to the circumstances in their life, because the moment they start reacting to the circumstances, and I say to them, why did you react, or what's wrong with you? If they say, oh, it's that person that's causing me to feel and think this way, then they're back to the unconscious program of victimization. And so people start to figure it out, and they say, no person, no circumstance, no condition in my life is going to cause me to fall from this energy. And when they're in a different energy then, and if they keep practicing it, the word meditation means to become familiar with. You got to be able to maintain that internal order independent of any condition in your environment. And if you do that properly, you start seeing they see feedback in your environment that you're creating from the field. And now you no longer have to go anywhere to get it. When there's a vibrational match between brain and heart coherence in some future, you got a radio signal and you're tuned into that frequency. Now you don't go through space to experience what you want. You're connected to that unified field. If you're connected to source, why would you go anywhere? You would draw it to you, and all of a sudden you start becoming the magnet to your experiences. And this is when it gets exciting, because when you're feeling wholeness and you're not feeling lack, and you're not waiting for the event to occur, then all of a sudden wealth doesn't become as important. The moment you start feeling wholeness, that's when your healing begins. The moment you start feeling gratitude, that's the moment you're drawing experiences to you. So we're teaching people how to change that process. And I just think that these times, more than ever, are a wake-up call for everybody to really start looking and becoming conscious and really seeing how they're going to emerge from this experience. And by the way, in a time when there's separation, in a time when there's isolation, when there's a time when there's some quarantine and fear that creates this kind of separation, I said to my community, oh, no, this is a time for us to unify. And we have research to show you don't need to be in someone's physical presence to cause them to feel love. In fact, we've done research to show that when you get a group of people together and they all start opening their hearts and they start synchronizing their energy. And they have the thought of somebody, because these are people that are trained now, they have a thought of a group of people or somebody that their life be enriched, that their body be healed. And we're watching a non-local effect of a person's heart going into coherence, being influenced by energy. Wow. Then I said to my community, well, now more than ever, we have to unify as a community, and we have to then in a new consciousness.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.